Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 15 Beta 2 and also iOS 14.7 Beta 5 have been out for a couple days to a couple weeks. So I want to talk about the overall experience, any issues that are remaining, and a few other features, and then of course take a look at your YouTube comments and the community poll. Now the first thing is a couple new features. Now with iOS 15 Beta 2 or Public Beta 2, one thing I didn't mention is if you go into the actual weather app, you'll see here it gives you a range of the temperature for the day. Now, this was not in Beta 1. It's just something that was missed. It's a fairly minor change, but it wasn't in Beta 1 where it gives you that nice indicator. And of course, depending on the phone you have, it may look a little bit different as you may not have those background animations or sort of this sun here, but that can change depending on which device you have, and there's 1,000 different ones. So I did make a separate video explaining all the different things that are different between the different devices. Basically, if you have an A12 Bionic or newer, you're going to have access to every feature. If you don't, you won't. So that's sort of what they've done with this. Now, another thing worth mentioning is I've had a few people message me on Twitter, sending me a direct message or DM, and they're showing that there's some signs of split screen. Now, I've shown this a little bit with the Shortcuts app. I created a split screen action. So if you go into the action here, you'll see that there's actually an option for split screen. It works fine on an iPad, and this is left over from an iPad, but it's almost like they were meaning to incorporate that into the iPhone and never did. And so if you try and run it, it doesn't work. But some people have been messaging me saying that if they turn their phone on the side, it's actually split exactly in half, and you wouldn't really expect that. So it splits in half and the app's over here, and it's sort of a bug. So maybe they're planning on it later in the release cycle, or maybe they just scrapped it altogether. But it's something that I would definitely love to see, but so far we haven't seen. Also, YouTube Picture-in-Picture, I did a separate video on this. More people in the United States, if you have YouTube Premium, are actually seeing Picture-in-Picture. I did a separate video on how to check if it's enabled, and of course I'll link that in the description, but more people are seeing that in the US and Canada that are premium subscribers. YouTube, I was going to say Apple, but YouTube meant to roll it out to everyone eventually, and it might be premium in other countries and then free in the United States. They haven't said really that clearly what's going to go on or a time frame, but more and more of you are actually messaging me asking me, where is YouTube Picture-in-Picture? So I thought I'd bring that up. Now with iOS 15 Beta 1 and Beta 2, Apple drastically changed the way Safari works. And while I like some of the features, there's a few things that are just really hard to get used to, and I'm not sure what I think about that. I actually was going to make a separate video talking about it and wondered what you thought about it, because there's some great things about it. I like that the address bar is at the bottom, but when you tap on it, it switches to the top. And so it's a bit confusing where it is. There's some nice new features such as dictation search right here with this microphone button, or you can just search right there with it. But if you cancel, of course, scrolling and everything's just like you would expect. Pull down to refresh, and nice things like that are going on, but just the way they've done this is a bit confusing. So I thought I'd just mention that and wondered what you thought about it if you've been using it for a few weeks at this point. Now with Beta 2, I just wanted to do a quick recap. We had SharePlay enabled, we got Memoji outfits, and we had a bunch of shortcuts improvements. So there were a bunch of other little things that they changed and improved, quite a few. I covered them in videos, but in general, we've had quite a few changes. But I'm looking forward to the next version. But I wanted to talk about issues that are going on in this in just a moment. But before we do that, iOS 14.7 Beta 5 came out this week. It seems like it's time for a final version. It's fairly complete, and there's very few issues in iOS 14.7 Beta 5. In fact, most people say it's solid. There's not really any issues, no crashing, no slowdowns, and good performance and battery life overall. I'm running it on my iPhone 12 Pro Max and also my iPhone XR. I've got it on both of them, and it's running just fine. It should be running fine, seeing how we're this late in the iOS 14 cycle. It makes a lot of sense that we're actually running like this at this point. But at this point, I'm really surprised that we haven't had a release candidate or a final release. So I would expect that pretty soon, and I'll talk more about when to expect those in a little bit. But as far as overall issues with iOS 14.7 Beta 5, I haven't really seen too many issues whatsoever, and I'll show you that later in the YouTube community poll comments. Now, as far as the overall experience with iOS 15 Beta 2, it seems like it's been pretty steady for an early beta. It's been stable for most people, and it's had some issues for sure. There's been crashes and resprings for quite a few people, including myself, although not as many as beta 1, so that's a good sign. In general, the OS works pretty good, but there are some bugs within it. So for example, green tint, quite a few people are saying that it's still there, but it's getting better, or they're seeing less of it throughout the OS. So I've seen some comments regarding that it does seem to be improving, but it's not all the way there yet. And like I've said many times before, Apple fixed this issue with the iPhone 11 Pro and iPhone 11 Pro Max in late August with iOS 13. So it definitely could be coming in an update, whether that be 14.7 and they just haven't said yet, or something else. It's hard to say. Now, when it comes to Wi-Fi has been pretty good overall for most people, although if you're on iOS 15, you still could have that issue where it just doesn't work sometimes. And I would suggest turning off Private Relay. So if you go into your settings, I generally turn this off, tap on your name at the top. Once you're in your iCloud settings, you'll see it's actually disappeared for me, but I turned it off and it just was a pain. It was causing problems with me actually being able to go to different websites. So I turned it off and it's working fine now. So that's definitely something that could be causing a problem. They have to fix it on the Apple server side. So we're just waiting for that to be finalized. That's still in beta technically. So I wouldn't recommend using that unless you need to be in a situation where you need your information private right now. And until then, I'm sure it'll be fine once it's released to the public. Now, as far as Wi-Fi on iOS 14.7, I wanted to bring that up because the Wi-Fi bug where you would have an odd SSID name or the network that you're joining. I showed this in detail in the release video or the what's new video. This fixes that Wi-Fi bug. So if you didn't see that video, just know that it's actually fixed in 14.7. If you join a network basically with percent signs in it, it can completely disable your network. So that's fixed now and has been resolved. Hopefully they'll update that in iOS 15, although I didn't test it. It's possible it's fixed in 15 beta 2, but I didn't want to test it in case it did brick the network settings and I had to wipe the phone to fix it. So I didn't want to try that. I'll try it with beta 3 and see what happens. Now, as far as the music bug, that seems to be a problem for quite a few people. There's a lot of people still saying that they'll play music for a little bit and then it will stop after 15 seconds. I personally have not experienced this, but quite a few people have and have been messaging me saying that it's fairly common. Enough people have been messaging me saying that they're having that problem. So it's definitely an issue for a lot of people. Now, Bluetooth continues to be a problem for a lot of people, including myself. Now, I haven't really had any issues with AirPods, for example, but I have had issues with it connecting to different things, even with AirDrop, for example. I use that all of the time, and AirDrop is just not working properly on my iPhone. So when I try and send a wallpaper to other devices, when I want to do these videos, it just won't send. I actually have to send it from my Mac to these devices to get it to work, or from an older version to these devices for it to work. So I'm definitely having some issues with that. And that relates to Bluetooth, where Bluetooth sort of handles that connection and makes a Wi-Fi direct connection, sends the file over. And so you need Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled for that to work. And it's definitely a problem on my 12 Pro Max. Now, as far as other Bluetooth issues, well, using it with my car, it's actually a car key with my Tesla. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and sometimes it won't connect to other things as well. So there's definitely some Bluetooth issues. A lot of you have said you're having issues as well. So there's something going on with that. Also, quite a few people are having issues with banking apps. So if you have a lot of banking apps you use, you might want to see if others are having that issue because it's really hit or miss. My banking apps are not a problem for me, but there's quite a few that are not working. Some of them tend to be in Germany, it seems like. So if you have a German bank, for example, a lot of those banking apps need to be updated by the app developer in order to fix that. Those normally come out either later on, or it could be something internal to the code. But generally when Apple updates the APIs or the plugins for developers on iOS versions, it causes some problems sometimes. So there's definitely something going on with that. Finally, there's an issue where maybe you're on a focus mode, you have do not disturb on or some other focus mode, and you've got it to auto reply through messages, and someone messages you, it will double reply sometimes. So I can show you that here. We'll go into messages, and you can see in messages that it says Aaron has notifications silenced with focus, and it repeats that message twice. So that's been an issue for people with me sending me messages or me messaging them and having focus modes turned on. So that seems to be a little bit of a bug. Of course, if we're having bugs, we need to report them in the feedback app, as that's very important to make sure that Apple prioritizes issues and then fixes them accordingly. So as far as that goes, It seems like they're working on things since we've had a 2-week gap between different updates. Now, as far as when to expect different updates, well, as far as iOS 14.7, I would expect a release candidate very, very soon with that version because we're on beta 5. So I would expect a release candidate this coming week. It's possible they could jump right to a final release, but with the build number of iOS 14.7 beta 5 ending in an A, it's very likely that we'll see a final release very, very soon. So we could have a release candidate this week with a final release this week, or a release candidate this coming week with a final release the next week. However, Apple's been kind of random, so we could even see a beta 6 or 7, but I would say that's pretty unlikely at this point. Now, as far as when to expect iOS 15 beta 3, well, on June 30th, we had the public beta come out along with a re-release of beta 2. So it's been a week and a half or so at this point. I would be very surprised if we don't see an updated beta 3 this coming week, along with that iOS 14.7 release candidate or release as well. So it would be very surprising to me if we don't see it. Of course, they could push it another week, but I think that's unlikely. And then we won't get to weekly cycles of betas for iOS 15, usually until August. So normally in August, we'll switch to weekly cycles. We'll have a bunch of betas, and then we'll have a release candidate and a final release in September generally. So if Apple continues to do what they've done every year, expect them to do that. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, as far as iPadOS 15 Beta 2, I've been using that full time on my iPad Pro 12.9 from 2020. This is the M1 version, and it's been pretty solid except for maybe battery life. So if we take a look here, you'll see that it's nice and fast. There's no issues here. I haven't had a single crash. I haven't had it respring or anything. It seems to be much more stable on iPadOS. But my battery life has been hit or miss. It seems like I'm charging it more and more with this update. So if we go into the last 10 days, for example, we'll go back one, and you'll see I charged it, well, to 100% a couple hours ago. So I've only been getting about 5 hours of screen on time with my iPad. That's pretty poor for an iPad. I should be getting closer to 10 hours. So hopefully beta 3 fixes that. Of course, this is an early beta. I could always revert to 14.6 or 14.7 betas if I wanted to, using a computer, of course, if it continues to be an issue. But in general, it's been pretty good. Now, as far as overall battery life with iOS 14.7 beta 5, most people, like I said before, are saying that it's quite good. So I wouldn't really expect any issues there. In fact, with iOS 14.6, a lot of people were having issues with battery in general. So I would expect this to get better. As iOS 14.6 sort of ages and has been on devices for a while, people report more bugs and are having worse and worse battery life. 50% of you said that you had issues with battery life. 14.7, very few people are saying that they have issues with battery. So that's a very, very good sign. As far as iOS 15, well, we're in early betas, but in general, battery life is mediocre on my phone anyway. On my 12 Pro Max, this is my main phone. You'll see my battery health is at 98%. Now, I've talked about this in the past quite a few times, almost every video, where battery health is not affected by an update ever. It's only rechecking for your battery health. The physical capability of the battery inside the phone. Batteries degrade over time, and until someone invents a better battery, that's just what we're stuck with. So Apple's actually just showing you the capability of the battery. It's holding 98% of its charge, where it was 100 when you got it new. If you replace the battery, it goes back up to 100. And so this should be above 80% after 2 years. That's typical. So about 10% of use a year, depending on how heavy of a user you are. As far as my overall usage, though, you can see over the past 10 days here, as I've been using it, it's not great. So yesterday I used it for 2 hours and 16 minutes of screen on time, 5 hours and 4 minutes of screen off time. That's with music and things like that, and used about 40 to 45% of my battery life. So that means I'm only going to get about 5 to 6 hours of screen on time. However, do consider that I would get about 10 hours of screen off time. So it's not really horrible battery life. But let's go back here where we used just a few hours of battery life and 2 hours and 19 minutes of screen on time, 1 hour and 31 minutes of screen off time. And I used a quarter of the battery. So it really varies day to day. And that would mean I'd get about 8 hours of screen on time if I was to use the remaining battery, the remaining 75%. So I would expect most people to get 6 to 8 hours on the 12 Pro Max, maybe about the same or a little more on the 11 Pro Max. It just depends. But right now, battery life is just not phenomenal. It's an early beta. They generally focus on that later, closer to the final release. So it's not too big of a concern for me. Now, as far as the overall YouTube community poll and comments, here are all the devices you're using based off of the YouTube community poll. I know a lot of you like those statistics, so here's all the devices and the different things you mentioned, for example, such as battery and heating and things like that. And speaking of the phone getting hot, quite a few of you have asked me to continue to cover this. With 14.7, it seems like it's not very warm at all. It's doing quite well, no issues there. It's nice and cool to the touch most of the time. Unless you're playing an intensive game or charging the battery, it's normal for it to get warm when doing those things. But overall, it's been pretty good. As far as 15 Beta 2, well, it's gotten abnormally hot from time to time on my 12 Pro Max, whether that be it's processing something in the background, maybe it's pulling logs, sending them to Apple, depending on what you have turned on, or maybe you're sending feedback and it's gathering data, or maybe you're just playing a game and it's using a lot of processing power. It does seem to get a little bit warmer than it did on 14, for example. So that's an early beta. Again, doesn't really bother me, but it's just something to note. Now let's go into the YouTube community poll. So we'll go to YouTube. Now I made this live last night and you can see it was for the iOS 14.7 beta 5 community poll 13 hours ago with 13,000 votes. So I appreciate everyone that voted and there's 109 comments. Now 9% of you are saying that it's great. 3% are saying that it's terrible. That's pretty consistent. 3% are saying it's okay but has some bugs. So that's actually quite low. That's a great sign. And then 27% of you are on iOS 15 betas and 59% of you are on iOS 14.6 or the public versions or older. And that's pretty typical. Mostly 50 to 60% of you generally like to stay on the public version. So that seems about right. But having very few bugs is a great sign. Compared to other versions, you'll see Beta 2, people said 15% of you had bugs with it. If you go back 10%, or 5%, that's on iOS 14.7. And you'll see that it goes down with 14.7. So it went from 6% to 5% and then down to 3%. That's a great sign as it seems to be more and more stable. Let's take a look at some of the YouTube community poll comments. And you'll see Christopher Palmer says, using iOS 14.7 public beta 5 on iPhone 12 Pro Max, overall smooth and no noticeable crashes, still has some battery drain even when the phone is idle and not in no activity. Andreas Moberg says, iPhone 11, iOS 14.7 beta 5, no issues at all, running fine with great battery life. Battery health is at 82%, still getting 7 to 10 hours of screen on time. So that's a pretty good sign, like I said before, with battery life. Jeremy DeBose said iOS 15 Beta 2, 12 Pro Max, and iPad Pro. It's stable, but got a few more, mostly minor bugs showing up. Hard to connect my AirPods to the phone sometimes. It was freezing YouTube and music yesterday when I'd connect them. Swiping the keyboard suggestions off on Safari and on iPadOS causes Safari crashing. Opening messages from notifications in landscape messes up the messages sometimes, bubbles fill the screen, etc., but the OS in general is still stable. So again, there's quite a few bugs with this, but that's normal for an early beta. Brandon Johnson said iOS 15 had a few bugs. Scrolling through old conversations and iMessages caused it to crash. Also, getting a call while watching YouTube, the video will pause when it rings, but as soon as you answer the call, the video starts playing again. Nico says, using iOS 14.7 on my iPhone 10, and it's working perfectly fine. I haven't noticed any bugs or other issues at all. All my apps are working, and battery life is amazing. Titan84 says, on iOS 15, battery life seems worse. A couple apps crash and or take multiple times to open or run. The navigation bar at the bottom is a bit frustrating as well. The nav bar will disappear just as I'm selecting it to type, then I'll select something underneath it because it goes away. That's all I've noticed for now, and I'm having that same issue. I think you mean in Safari. Also, I'm seeing others mention music problems. My Apple Music has also experienced problems. In CarPlay, it has had problems enough to where I'd be screaming at Apple if I weren't in beta. It drops connect frequently, pauses songs, and then doesn't restart. I've never had those problems before. I can drive an hour through okay service areas and maybe get 15 minutes of music. Vlogging with George says, I'm using an iPhone 7 and performance and battery life has been pretty good for an early beta. Using iOS 14.7 Beta 5 on my 12 Pro Max and iPad Pro 12.9 from 2020, the battery is great on both, and also performance and very smooth. Seems like an RC build. That's how good it is. Love your videos. Thank you. Siri Jordan says, very great battery life. iPhone 12 here. So that's everything with iOS 14.7 Beta 5. Hopefully we'll see a release candidate very, very soon. And also iOS 15 Beta 3 hopefully very, very soon as well. I can't wait to see what they update with that. and it will hopefully get much more stable as time goes on, since it was a major feature update as far as little things, but not major visual changes. So I think we're going to have a much more stable version with iOS 15. But let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on the wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description as I always do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.